Tonight we are looking at 3 horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. A trainee guide loses her lamp in the black water of Waitomo, under the only cave that lights itself. A scientist stays 3 minutes too long inside Movile, the sealed cave that evolved its own poisonous air. And a dry suit zip lets go in 2-degree glacier water, deep in Silfra, the crack between 2 continents. Each story starts with confidence and ends in chaos. As always, viewer discretion is advised. On June 19th, 2026, Mia Tanner slipped into the cold black stream of Waitomo in New Zealand, the only cave that lights itself. A limestone maze where 100,000 glowworms hang their blue-green lures from the ceiling like a sky that came inside. It was her final training run before her first solo tour. 8 clients on rubber tubes, 2 guides, 1 wet kilometer of streamway, out by 4. Mia was 27 years old, a trainee guide who had logged 2 seasons in the Waitomo streamways, quick to laugh, slow to hurry. The senior guides liked one thing about her above all. At every briefing, she recited the drill the tourists giggled at. Lose the group, lose your lamp, then sit still, look up, and trust the worms. That afternoon, the water was up a little from a wet week, and the trip ran with 10 lamps, 8 tubes, and 1 river with opinions. Here is what you need to understand about a glowworm ceiling. It is not decoration, it is a map. The worms hang where the air is stillest, and the water below runs deepest and smoothest. Their threads mark the stream's main channel the way lights mark a runway. Old Waitomo hands read the ceiling the way sailors read stars. The tourists float under it and see only magic. The tour ran its sweet routine, tubes bumping in the dark, gasps under the first gallery of blue-green stars, the water carrying everyone at walking pace, while the guides counted heads by lamp. 8 clients, 2 staff, 10 lights on the water. At the halfway eddy, the group rafted up for the long look at the famous ceiling, and Mia hung at the tail, as trainees do. Leaving the eddy, that is when the wet week collected its fee. A client's tube spun off the raft toward the side channel, and Mia kicked after it, because trainees fetch, and the tail of a raft in the dark is a place nobody watches, and the neat head count had already failed. She caught the tube in 4 strokes, turned to kick back, and her shoulder met a low arch of limestone. What she didn't know, pushing off the arch with the tube in tow, the bump had bought her a second problem. And that stone would now cost her the lamp. The headset skewed, flooded, flickered twice, and died in the side channel's dark. The dark arrived complete, and the current kept her moving. The main lights were gone. Panic paddled beside her. She was lost. Her hands found the tube. Because this is what the side channels of Waitomo do. They run parallel to the main stream, close enough to hear it, split by rock curtains that turn 10 meters of separation into a different cave. 1 trainee, no lamp, 12 degrees of water, and a tour drifting away with a count that would not come up short for another 3 minutes. Watch what she had left, because it was not nothing. A tube to float on, and a cold budget of maybe 40 minutes before the shivering got loud. A senior guide upstream who would miss her at the next count. And above her, dimming and brightening as the ceiling rose and fell, the living sky, still switched on. She did the drill the tourists giggle at. She stopped swimming. She lay back on the tube, let the current hold her, and looked up until her eyes adjusted, and the ceiling resolved from black into a river of blue-green stars. Put yourself on that tube for 1 minute of it. Water at 12 degrees pressing the wetsuit to your ribs. No lamp, no walls, no floor you can see. And overhead, 100,000 small blue lights, arranged, if you know how to read them, into an arrow. The worms thin out over the side channels, where the air moves. They crowd thick and bright over the deep main stream. She read the ceiling, found the dense river of light off to her right, and paddled for it. 5 meters, a rock curtain, 10 meters, and the stars overhead doubled. At 10 minutes, she was back under the bright main gallery, floating the channel the worms marked. At 15, her shivering started in earnest, and she kept her strokes long and slow. At 20, she saw them. 10 lamps, stopped, sweeping the water in the pattern she had been drilled to expect. She did not shout. She whistled. 2 fingers, the piercing one her father taught her on a farm, and 10 beams swung as one. The senior guide reached her in 30 strokes and held her tube with both hands, and the 8 tourists applauded in the dark without being sure what for. The count had come up short at minute 4 and come up whole at minute 22. They floated the last bend together, and Mia looked up the whole way. She survived on a drill and a ceiling, and the operator's report ruled the incident a textbook lost light recovery and printed the numbers that made it 1. 22 minutes in the water, 0 panic strokes, 1 lamp lost, 1 trainee found by the worms before the searchers. The only cave that lights itself still hangs its blue-green sky over every tour, and Mia passed her solo check the following month. She gives the giggled-at briefing herself now at every put-in, and she has earned the right to the last line she adds to it. Lose the group, lose your lamp, then sit still, look up, and trust the worms. The sky in there is alive, she tells them. It has been showing cavers the deep water for 1,000,000 years. It has failed nobody who read it. On November 5th, 2026, Nadia Roth climbed down a narrow concrete shaft in a cold Romanian field and through a sealed hatch into Movile, the only cave that evolved its own atmosphere, cut off from the sky for 5,000,000 years and breathing nothing the surface would recognize. She was one of the few dozen humans ever permitted inside, on a rope, on a meter, on a clock. 40 minutes in the far galleries, then out. Nadia was 41 years old, a cave microbiologist who had logged 12 research trips into Movile's poisoned dark, one of a handful of people qualified to work there. Her colleagues knew one habit above all. She taped her exposure meter to her forearm like a wristwatch, because in Movile, she liked to say, the air is alone, and the meter is the bank. The plan was routine science. Rope down, 40 minutes at the far lake room, 2 sample racks, home for the ferry. Here is what you need to understand about the air in Movile. It is not thin, it is wrong. Half the oxygen of the surface, 100 times the carbon dioxide, sulfur riding under it, an atmosphere brewed by the cave's own chemistry. And wrong air does not announce itself. No smell that saves you, no burn in the chest at the moment it matters. The doctrine is the meter, the buddy, and the exposure clock. Nothing in the body can be trusted to notice. The descent ran like every one of her 12. Down the rope through the hatch, its seal hissing shut above her, then along the dry upper galleries on hands and knees, the clay floor printed with fewer boot marks than the moon. Her partner Stefan took the near gallery, and Nadia crawled onto the lake room, the deepest station, where the science was richest. The lake room sat at the cave's lowest point, still and warm, a slow drip clicking somewhere off in the dark, the water black and skinned with mats of bacteria that were the whole reason anyone came. At the second sample rack, that is when the room's arithmetic shifted. Her meter clicked twice and chirped its first amber warning at minute 30, early, because a wet autumn had raised the lake and squeezed the gallery's airspace thinner, and the 40-minute plan had already failed. Amber meant finish and go. The second rack held 3 vials, science her lab had waited a year for. What she didn't know, seating the next vial with steady hands, at the lake room's floor, the bad layer had risen with the water. And that decision would cost more than the 3 minutes it seemed to spend. Down in the borrowed air, the loan was already being called. The meter went red at 34, and she capped the last vial anyway. Her fingers missed the clip. The room had failed her. Panic knocked politely, far away. Because this is what low oxygen does. It does not choke you, it robs you. Judgment first, then fingers, then legs. Each theft disguised as tiredness, none of it painful enough to argue with. One woman lay at the lowest point of a sealed cave, 90 meters of crawl from the rope, in a body already 3 minutes into spending what it did not have. Watch the 2 clocks run. On her forearm, the meter counted red, taped where her eyes would fall on it, the habit doing exactly its job for a mind going slowly deaf to it. In the near gallery, Stefan checked his watch at minute 35, called her name down a passage that ate the sound, and started for the lake room fast, on hands and knees, with a mask and a bottle of the only clean air in the cave. Put yourself in that crawl for 1 minute of it. The clay under your palms is 5 million years old. A meter on your arm shouts in a language you are forgetting. And the strange, warm patience of the wrong air tells you a rest, just a short one, would fix everything. She made 40 meters on training alone, sample bags still clipped, before her arms folded at the low arch. At 60 meters she was still, face turned toward the rope she could no longer name. Stefan reached her at minute 41, masked her with the clean bottle, and dragged her the last 50 meters by the harness, shouting the alarm up the shaft. The surface crew hauled her up through the hatch into November air that tasted of everything Movile is not, and worked on her in the field grass for an hour. The helicopter came fast and the doctor on it was good, but the clean air had arrived at minute 41, and the room had started collecting at 34. Nadia Roth died 2 days later in a Constanza hospital without waking. 7 minutes of borrowed air past the amber, with the last 3 vials of her career sealed and perfect in the bag beside her. The cave had not crushed her, soaked her, or dropped a stone. It had simply charged interest. The inquest ruled the death hypoxia in a known hazardous atmosphere, and its verdict now hangs laminated inside the hatch, the last thing every researcher reads before the seal closes. Amber is not a warning. It is the exit the meter notices for you, because in this air you will not. Her 3 vials grew cultures that appeared in journals under her name, with a black band beside it, and the lab she built runs the Movile program still. 2-person stations now, never more than 10 meters apart. Amber means moving. The only cave that evolved its own atmosphere goes on brewing its wrong air in the dark, owing nothing to anyone. The air down there is alone, her students repeat at the hatch, taping the meters to their forearms the way she taught them. Borrow it briefly, pay it back walking. And when the bank says amber, the science can wait a year. It waited 5 million. That is the verdict she left them, and the one her funeral asked them to keep. On March 27, 2026, Aaron Walsh stepped down the metal stairs into water so cold it rang. Into Silfra, in Iceland, the only crack that separates 2 continents. A flooded fissure between the American and Eurasian plates, filled with glacier water, filtered through lava for 100 years. The water was 2 degrees, the visibility was 100 meters, and the dive plan was the classic. 40 minutes down the fissure's halls to the lagoon, 1 hand on America, 1 on Europe. Aaron was 28 years old, a dry suit instructor trainee who had logged 400 cold water dives from Puget Sound to the North Atlantic. Her mentors knew her for one obsession that predated the training. She rehearsed her failures dry. Every gear emergency walked through on land, out loud, until her hands knew the order without her. The plan that morning was her instructor assessment. Lead 2 clients through the fissure on a single tank each, demonstrate the cold water brief, and sign the logbook that would make her staff. Here is what you need to understand about Silfra. The water is the clearest a diver will ever meet, and the coldest most will ever work in. 2 degrees does not feel like temperature, it feels like pressure, and the dry suit is the whole treaty with it. Inside the suit, warm air and wool. Outside, glacier melt that takes a bare hand from useful to wooden in about 5 minutes. The treaty holds as long as the zip does. The dive opened like flying, the fissure walls dropping away in blue-white lava, the 2 clients swimming the gap between continents with their arms spread, laughing bubbles. Erin ran the line at the rear, on plan, her suit snug and warm, the exit stairs 20 minutes ahead. They passed the big hall at 18 meters, the deepest reach of the classic route, right on schedule. Leaving the hall, That is when she felt the first thread of cold at the base of her spine, thin as a wire, wrong as a fire alarm, because a shoulder seal does not weep in a maintained suit, and the treaty with the water had already failed. She reached back and felt the zip's last 2 centimeters standing open, nudged by a tank strap at the surface check, riding unlatched for 18 minutes. What she didn't know, pressing the zip with a thumb that could not close it. 2 degrees does not leak, it invades. And this habit would now run her exit for her. The failures rehearsed dry, out loud, until her hands knew the order. Because the wire of cold was about to become a flood. The zip shifted and the glacier came in. Cold filled the suit's spine. Her breath seized once. The treaty had failed whole. Panic knocked on frozen glass. Because this is the arithmetic of a flooded dry suit in glacier water. The insulation dies wet, and the body starts paying heat it cannot mint. The diver has minutes of good hands and good judgment, not many, before the cold starts making her decisions for her. 2 clients ahead who did not know. 15 minutes of Fissure to the stairs. 2 degrees everywhere, incoming. Watch the ledger she ran in the clearest water on Earth. Rule 1 from the dry rehearsals. Do not bolt. A sprint burns heat and gas and arrives shaking. Rule 2. Signal now, while the hands still work. She banged her tank twice, and 2 client faces turned in the blue. Rule 3. Shallow up. Every meter shed was pressure off the flood and minutes onto the clock. Put yourself in that suit for 1 minute of it. Glacier water crawling down your spine into your boots, hands going from cold to clumsy to wooden on a schedule you can feel. And the clearest water on Earth showing you the exit stairs, tiny and bright and 15 minutes away. At 10 minutes out, her legs were logs, and her fins kept their rhythm anyway, the rehearsals swimming for her. At 6 minutes, the shivering stopped, and she knew from the textbook exactly how bad that news was, and swam through it. The clients did what her own brief had taught them 40 minutes earlier, 1 on each side, hands under her arms at the shallow steps, flying her up the lagoon like a stretcher with fins. They broke the surface at the exit stairs together, and the surface crew had her suit peeled and the foil around her in 90 seconds. The assessment instructor already in the water beside them, having watched the whole textbook write itself at distance. Erin Walsh came back to warm in the van with tea she could not yet hold, 19 minutes after the zip let go, with a core temperature the medic read out loud twice to believe it. She survived on rehearsal and restraint, and the assessment she thought she had failed was signed that evening with a note her mentors still quote. Candidate flooded at 18 meters in 2-degree water and exited on procedure, protecting 2 clients throughout. Hire her before someone else does. The only crack that separates 2 continents still runs glacier clear at 2 degrees between its plates, and Erin briefs it daily now, staff jacket and all. The report that ruled her flood a textbook exit hangs framed in the dive shed. Her pre-dive ritual has 1 extra beat these days, and every client copies it without being asked. A gloved hand reaching back, twice, to the last 2 centimeters of the zip. Rehearse your failures dry, she tells her trainees on the metal stairs. Walk them out loud until your hands own the order. The cold will come for your thinking first, so leave the thinking somewhere it can't reach.